Coming up next on Maine Challenge, District Attorney Natasha Irving. Hello and welcome to Maine Challenge. Our guest this week is District Attorney Natasha Irving. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
It's good to have you. You are the District Attorney for 4 counties, am I correct?
Yes.
That would be Saginaw,
Lincoln, Knox, and Waldo counties.
Knox and Waldo. That's a lot of miles.
It is. I've put a lot of miles on my car. I have a Prius, so that helps. But yeah, I get around. I get around the mid coast quite a bit. So
And
lucky to
let me guess. The counties don't offer frequent flyer miles, so it's not like you could.
I know. There's an airport in Wiscasset and there's an airport in Owlshead. I don't know why I'm not. Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see if we can get that in the budget.
Well, first of all, my first question is to you: is the job of district attorney pretty much as you expected to be when you ran for office, or is it different? And if so, how?
So I would say that I came in and I ran on a platform of criminal justice reform, knowing that the district attorney had enormous power over plea negotiations, over who was charged, what they were charged with, and what the ultimate outcomes were. So that was my first one prong was that we would charge less. We would stop charging so many non-violent, non-dangerous crimes, so we would save resources for violent and sexually based crimes that I didn't believe were being prosecuted appropriately. I didn't believe that they were being prosecuted with enough veracity. The first part, not charging as much. Not sending people to jail for mental illness and addiction-based crimes that were non-dangerous, getting people into treatment instead of jail, using restorative justice for thefts and for non-violent crimes. I feel that there's been tremendous progress on that front. Now, reallocating our time, our energy, our resources into prosecuting violent and sexually based crimes is something that we work on every day, and it's something that keeps me up many nights. That is something that takes a greater effort from all of us, the district attorney's office, but law enforcement also. So we're really working on building evidence-based prosecutions for things like domestic violence, sexual assault, and that is complex, and it's taking more time, and I think it's going to take more resources from our counties, or really ideally, I think we should have a grant writer to be able to bring in money to help us really tackle those challenges. So I guess that's a long answer, but what I'm getting to is some of it happens like that. And some of it is a long haul, a long effort to try and really change how we're focusing this system.
Does most of your funding come from the counties, or are there other sources of funding as well?
Yeah, we have our attorneys, all of our assistant district attorneys and the deputy district attorney and myself, all of our salaries are paid through the state of Maine. All of the other resources are paid by the counties. So I have 4 counties, 4 different county governments trying to coordinate 4 counties, trying to negotiate with 4 counties regarding something new, for instance.
And 4 budget proposals.
Yeah, so the issue is often becomes, well, are the other 3 counties going to do this? So it becomes, and they're not all on the same budget schedule. So it becomes difficult. All the counties have different dynamics, and I think that focusing again our efforts in a new way, and recognizing my power as district attorney to do this, working with the counties to allocate funds differently than before is, it's a challenge. And they do pay for everything else, with exception of one other grant that we get every year to help pay for victim witness advocates in the district, and for a domestic violence investigator.
Do you have to partner with 4 different or maybe 3 different jail administrators and sheriffs, right?
So we have 4 sheriffs, and in Wiscasset, the jail in Wiscasset, both Saginaw and Lincoln County folks that are sentenced to jail go there. And in Knox County, they have their own jail. And the jail administrator, it's complicated, but the jail administrator for Knox County is also the jail administrator for Waldo County. In Waldo County, we have the reentry center, but all of the jail sentenced folks go to Somerset County. They have a new contract with Somerset County. The jail administrator for Knox and Waldo is an incredible person, and the reentry center is incredible. And I look forward to keep being able to work together to get to really look at alternatives to. We all have the same. I think the same motivation to keep people out of jail that really should not be there. They should be in treatment or in some sort of rehabilitative program.
Thank you. Going national for just a minute, and then we'll come back and talk some more about, or talk some about restorative justice. But have you had a chance to look at the Democrats' police reform bill that's in Congress right now?
I have been able to take a cursory look at it. I have had quite a busy period of time since that came out, but I have been able to take a look at it, yes. Any
thoughts? I mean, is it something that's actually going to be feasible? And I think that it is a really good step as far as what the federal government can do. I do think that the federal government should have a larger role in making sure that we are compliant in all our police agencies in the state of Maine and around the country. I do think that that is incredibly important. I also think that banning all types of neck restraint nationally, federally, is absolutely must happen. Do you agree with the term defund when applied to police budgets?
No, I don't believe that defunding it wouldn't be the term I would use, but I will say I understand the sentiment. I understand the frustration from folks that are moving for defunding the police. My belief is, I think the word itself retracts slightly, and I don't mean that as a criticism, but the way I would look at it is, let's not defund, let's reimagine. I personally think our police need more funds. In my district, I'm dealing with police chiefs and sheriffs who are the epitome of community-based policing. They are the absolute what you would hold up as a standard of folks that are trying to make their communities more safe by tackling things like access to mental health care, access to addiction treatment, deflection from jail, and deflection from prison, trying to get folks into those services. And what they need are, for instance, in Waldo County sheriffs through Sheriff Trafton and through their wonderful Chief Deputy Jason Trundy secured a grant with the Bureau of Justice Administration. And they're partnering with Maine Health Equity Alliance. They're going to have a crisis worker that's able to go out on calls, and a restorative justice worker that goes out on calls. So my police agencies are doing this already. In Damariscotta, Chief Warlick has been really at the forefront of bringing folks into services with addiction services. The same with Chief Hosh in Boothbay Harbor. So, and I could name literally probably every single one of my chiefs. I've worked with John Lash in Waldoboro to make sure a young man that had some significant was looking at significant legal trouble, that he got the help he needed instead of a jail sentence at 19 years old. So I'm dealing with chiefs who are already on the forefront of doing this, who are already working to reimagine what police are. And that's what I think needs to happen. I think that we need to start looking at what police are getting calls for. Police are getting calls for crisis, for mental health crisis, for addiction crisis, for overdoses. We need police that are able to handle those calls, and that doesn't mean militarizing police, but it also doesn't mean taking away all their funding. We have to recognize that police have been at the forefront of this, and we need to invest in good police practices and in more methods to de-escalate situations instead of escalating. I think the chiefs and the sheriffs that I have to work with have been working on doing that for years now. And so I don't believe in defunding. I think that is the front line of help. I think we need to reimagine and get other positions in our police departments as our first responders that aren't just men and women with guns responding to a crisis, but men and women with mental health training and addiction training.
I have to say, I live in Knox County in the town of Thomaston, and I'm very impressed with, and I know and have worked with Rockland's police chief, Thomaston's police chief, and with our county sheriff, who I think are all smart, forward-looking law enforcement officers. And then the word defund sort of scares me, because it's really, I don't think that's what people really want to do or will ever happen. But it's a hot button term that probably takes us in the wrong direction. But that's my opinion.
And if you look at what's happened in the Mid-Coast in the last decade, Thomaston Police Department was defunded. We had police that didn't have health insurance. That's not what I call justice for police or for community. And the same, we've seen other communities that didn't want to. And I understand the tax burden is enormous, and that's another issue, right? But these police departments, when you lose your local police department, people weren't happy with that either, and they shouldn't be. Having your local police department is really the front line for help, and that's just, I think that we need to invest in these departments that are doing incredible work every day. And I agree, Sheriff Carroll, Chief Hoppy, and Chief Young in Rockland, they're all exemplary to work with, exemplary chiefs and sheriffs.
Talking about judges and court cases for just a second, could you talk about why so many cases are finalized and reported with the term sentenced to 5 years in prison with all but 6 months suspended? And then you look at what they were charged with, and if you have been paying attention, you know a little bit about the crime and the victim, and it just seems like such a disconnect to, I'm sure, a lot of citizens, that they make a sentence of whatever, 10 years, whatever it might be, and then suspend almost all of it. What's the point of that, and why do they do it?
And I can understand the initial reaction that somebody's getting away, they're getting a 10-year sentence, but they're only serving 2 years or something. And that sounds, and I will tell you that sometimes, many times, our office is frustrated with the sentences that we end up getting, either through sentencing argument, or through a plea bargain based on what a judge has said they will sentence. Maine, there's good and bad, right? Maine, we don't tend to sentence for most crimes extremely long sentences, and that's good in a lot of ways. In Alabama, for instance, I think you can get a 99-year sentence for marijuana possession. And I could be misquoting that, but I do think that there are those statutes that you could get 99 years for possession of drugs, including marijuana, depending on how many times you've been convicted. So that's a good thing in some ways, right? But then when we have serious domestic violence cases, sometimes we have hurdles. And I talked to you about how we're trying to build up those cases and invest in those cases. So for instance, an officer could show up to a domestic violence call, and the survivor makes statements about what just happened. Now, but that is hearsay. So if that survivor doesn't say it on the stand and refuses to say it on the stand, then we can't get that statement in. So that's why we want body cams on. We want these statements recorded, because we do lose an enormous amount of our victim it's a complex issue, but survivors of domestic violence, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of reasons that they may not be cooperative with prosecution. So we want to make sure that we have the tools from the outset. So if we lose cooperation, if a victim recants or changes a story, again, to no fault of their own, this is a deep-seated psychological cycle of abuse, and this is exactly what abusers do to their victims. So we know that we're not going to get a conviction after trial, and we're put in the position of plea bargaining. Now, lastly, I will say that when you're looking at a sentence that's suspended, one of the benefits to that is, let's say you get a 5-year sentence with all but 9 months suspended. That sounds like a slap on the wrist, potentially, right? One of the reasons that it can be helpful is because that person, whether they're in jail for 1 year or in prison for 1 year or 5 years, they're going to be out, and 5 years comes sooner than you think. So having that period where they have consequences over them, right? So they're on probation and they have a suspended sentence. So that means if they were convicted, they would be open to going back for another set of years. And that's the calculations that we're doing, is what kind of community monitoring do we have? What are the tools to make sure this person gets the treatment they need to potentially, like, for instance, we have in Maine, if you're convicted of domestic violence, you are required to do certified batterers intervention. And this is cognitive behavioral therapy that has a good impact. It's not perfect, it's not 100%, but it is over the course of 42 weeks, and it is really quite an undertaking. They go to domestic violence court often, and having that treatment, and then having those consequences, the probation, you can't have contact with your victim, all of that over their head creates community safety. So it's not as punitive as sending somebody to prison for 5 years. However, it is evidence-based as far as keeping the community safe. So I understand, I completely understand and commiserate. I understand that those punitive measures for some of these crimes are what the community wants and desires, but we have to weigh that with evidence-based results, knowing that that person is going to have a better chance of reentry without committing more violent crimes, and that ultimately has to weigh on our minds, because creating another victim is not going to be helpful to anyone.
Thank you. That's a really interesting and complicated set of issues there. And speaking of complicated issues, would you give our audience a primer on the whole concept of restorative justice and how, when and if we get there, it will improve a lot of lives?
I will try to do my best. It's quite a concept. So restorative justice, it really starts out with building community and building healthy communities that are resilient and able to deal with harm. So you start before the harm has occurred, and you really look at trying to build connection and build networks and connection with folks in the community. So we have the vocabulary, we have the understanding that when a crime occurs, a harm occurs, the community can come together, right? The community can come together to address the harm. So it really takes that initial community building where we all invest in our community. So this can happen at a school, or it can happen in the city of Rockland, or it can happen in the county of Knox. It's about really having that localized community investment of the people. Now, when you're looking at restorative justice in the criminal justice system, you're looking at, or when there is a potential to have that interface with the criminal justice system, a harm has been done, right? And that would if it was something that our office might be involved in, it could be a theft, it could be a criminal trespass, there could be any number of different crimes where there is a victim that has suffered a harm, and really, in order to be made whole, restorative justice, the philosophy is different than our traditional criminal justice system, which says, well, it's the state versus John Doe, and we are going to try and prove a case against you for shoplifting, and we're going to get a sentence of 10 days in jail, and then you will have a criminal record for the rest of your life. It's punitive and it's not restorative. The victim may have some say in what a jail sentence might be, but they don't. We don't get any direction as far as righting the wrong other than that punitive measure. With restorative justice, you sit together with the person that created the harm and the person that was harmed, and then other affected individuals in the community. Could be a neighbor, it could be the family of the person that was harmed, it could be another local business that has been harmed by shoplifting, for instance. And you have a facilitator that's there that helps this dialogue where the person that created the harm apologizes for what they did, and they explain what brought them to that point in their life where they committed that crime. I'm sorry, we've got so the victim is able to express what happened to them, how this affected their life, and together they create what's called a reparative agreement as a community, right? And what will it take for the victim to feel whole, and really for the community to feel whole? Because a crime, again, in the criminal justice system, we say the state of Maine. This was a crime against the people of Maine. We don't name the victim. It's the people of Maine. So this takes into account the victim and their needs, but also the community needs, and that crime really affects, this was our standard as a community, and you broke that. So what repair can you agree to, can we all agree to, that would make this better? So that could be community service. That could be that the individual gets treatment for drug addiction or for mental illness. It could be any number of things, but it's agreed upon. And then if the offender, well, the offender will have a mentor or somebody to help them through this process. And after a year or after some amount of time, we revisit and see what the progress was, and if the reparative agreement has been fulfilled. And at that point, you would either this is in the criminal justice system and there would be an outcome, for instance, a dismissal or an unconditional discharge without jail, or they didn't fulfill that, and they would be looking at a legal consequence, or what we're looking at right now is complete deflection out of the criminal justice system. So if a victim opts at the outset to use restorative justice in place of the criminal justice system, we have those, we're building that capacity. Restorative justice is actually building the capacity with police in Knox County, but has had an MOU in place in Waldo County in Belfast. And so those cases, the victims have much more direction and much more say, and they're not brought into this lengthy process where a person might not have an ultimate consequence for a year from when they were charged. So my belief is, again, victims should have more of a say in this system and be more of a part of the system because they were harmed, but the community should also. And the outcomes in these matters where we use restorative justice are far superior to ending recidivism, to getting people on their feet, and to building up communities instead of costing a bunch of taxpayer dollars to throw someone in jail where they learn more skills to live on the wrong side of the law and end up just building up a criminal career instead of building up our community. So I am a big believer. We have great practitioners in our district that are experts on this, and I have meetings with them, standing meetings every month with restorative justice, to make sure that we're still really addressing where we're going from here. So, and
to this observer, it feels to me like you're making progress. It's probably not fast enough for some, and I certainly understand that. But it does feel like there's some momentum and some progress, and I appreciate your work on that and that of the Restorative Justice group. We only have a couple of minutes left, so we can't get too long into this, but do you feel comfortable that there are significant and effective limits on police use of force? Obviously, we're in the nation, we're going through a traumatic experience after the Floyd matter. And can we say that can't happen here?
We should. There's a lot that needs to happen. First off, we need to explore the law in Maine is, was the shooting justified, deadly use of force justified, and that's based on whether the officer feels that deadly force is necessary or is reasonable under the circumstances, and it would be to preserve their life or the lives of others. And that sounds reasonable, right? Except that a lot of the cases that we're looking at of deadly force in Maine, we say, why was this escalated? If you look at the police shootings in Maine, of the folks that, and there are many police shootings that are absolutely justified, and the police did everything they could and were attacked. And I know in my town in Waldoboro, my police chief John Lash was shot in the vest when he showed up to a domestic violence call, and it was an absolute tragedy, but it was absolutely unavoidable. So there are those types of police shootings, but then there are also, and luckily we haven't seen any of these as of late in my district, but there are incidents where it was a mental health call. And it really is a great deal of incidents in the state of Maine where a family called because their family member was in crisis, and their family member ends up being shot dead by police. And many of these family members are unarmed. And you just think, why did it escalate to this point? And the ultimate question is of whether it is justified seems almost out of place to, I mean, that's important to analyze, but you say, why did we get there? Why didn't this person get a mental health care worker or an ambulance instead of getting shot? So secondly,
unfortunately we're coming right to the close here. I'd love to have another hour to cover some of this stuff, and we didn't get anywhere near all the stuff that I'd prepared, but I really appreciate your coming on. Natasha Irving, the District Attorney for Saginaw, Lincoln, Knox, and Waldo counties. And thank you for your ongoing work, and keep it up.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be here today. I appreciate it.
And thanks everyone for joining us on Maine Challenge.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.